What if the world's next big economic collapse isn't in New York or London, but in the quiet corners of the globe where stability unravels silently? In our interconnected world, a tremor in one nation can send shockwaves across continents. The warning signs, soaring inflation, crushing debt, and the quiet desperation of millions, are everywhere. These aren't just numbers, they're families struggling, futures in jeopardy. The global economy is a complex ecosystem, and its vulnerabilities matter more than ever. Join me as we uncover 10 countries teetering on the edge, facing the real possibility of economic collapse by 2026. The journey begins now. Our story begins, a tale of paradise lost and lessons learned. In Sri Lanka, a teardrop-shaped island nation, rich in culture and history, once celebrated as the pearl of the Indian Ocean, a jewel admired for its natural beauty and strategic location. But beneath the surface, years of borrowing for ambitious projects, grand in scale but questionable in foresight, left the nation deeply indebted, burdened by obligations it struggled to meet. Tax cuts implemented with the promise of prosperity, instead gutted government revenue, weakening the financial foundations of the state. This ultimately led to emptying state coffers, leaving the government vulnerable. Then, the devastating 2019 Easter bombings crippled tourism, a vital source of income and employment. And as the world grappled with COVID-19, Sri Lanka too suffered, as shut down travel, isolating the island and its economy. This cut off vital foreign currency, exacerbating the already precarious financial situation. Adding fuel to the fire, the government's sudden ban on chemical fertilizers, a policy shift intended to promote, meant to force organic farming practices across the nation, backfired, with devastating consequences. Crop yields plummeted, threatening the nation's food security. As a result, food shortages soared, leaving many struggling to feed their families. By 2022, Sri Lanka defaulted on its debt, a stark admission of its economic woes. This marked the first time in its history. Inflation soared, eroding purchasing power and savings. Consequently, basic necessities, once easily accessible, became unaffordable, pushing countless families into poverty. And endless fuel queues, a symbol of the nation's energy crisis, became the norm, disrupting daily life and economic activity. In response, mass protests, fueled by frustration and desperation, toppled the government, signaling a profound shift in the political landscape. This was a testament to the power of a desperate populace, demanding change and accountability. Today, Sri Lanka is on a long, arduous, painful road to recovery, navigating a complex web of challenges. This recovery is supported by international bailouts, crucial for stabilizing the economy, and tough reforms, necessary but often unpopular. But scars remain, reminders of the crisis and its impact. These include political instability, a fragile and uncertain environment, heavy debt, a constant weight on the nation's future, and shattered trust, a deep wound that will take time to heal. Sri Lanka's collapse serves as a warning, a cautionary tale for other nations. It shows that paradise can be lost, even in the most idyllic settings, when economic fundamentals, the bedrock of stability, are ignored, neglected, or mismanaged. Even the most beautiful places, blessed with natural resources and cultural heritage, are not immune, no matter how resilient they may seem, to crisis, to the devastating consequences of economic mismanagement. The world is watching, observing closely, to see if Sri Lanka, with its resilience and determination, can rebuild, can rise from the ashes of economic collapse. Its story, a complex and multifaceted narrative, is a lesson, a valuable case study in economic fragility, for us all, with implications that resonate far beyond its shores. Next, our journey takes us to Lebanon, a nation steeped in history and once a beacon of prosperity in the Middle East. It was once known as the Switzerland of the Middle East, a testament to its economic stability and allure. At the heart of this prosperity was its banking system, a sector that unfortunately became the architect of its downfall. This banking system, for a long time, served as the bedrock of the Lebanese economy, attracting significant foreign investment and fostering a sense of financial security. However, beneath the surface it operated as a state-sanctioned, elaborate Ponzi scheme, a system built on unsustainable promises and deceit. It worked by attracting dollars, primarily from the Lebanese diaspora eager to invest in their homeland. These dollars were lured in with the promise of high interest rates, rates that were far above global averages. But instead of being invested productively, this influx of cash was primarily used to pay off old debts, perpetuating a cycle of financial dependency. and, critically, to fund a corrupt state where public funds were siphoned off for personal gain and political patronage. The scheme was inherently fragile, and when political instability, a constant specter in Lebanon, inevitably slowed the flow of new dollars into the country, the entire edifice began to crumble. The system, starved of fresh capital, finally collapsed under its own weight. In 2019, as the crisis deepened, banks took drastic measures and froze withdrawals, effectively locking people out of their accounts. This action trapped the life savings, the hard-earned nest eggs, of millions of ordinary Lebanese citizens. The Lebanese lira, once a symbol of national pride, has since lost over 98% of its value, rendering it virtually worthless on the international market. This devaluation triggered hyperinflation, sending prices soaring and eroding purchasing power. As a result, daily life became increasingly unaffordable, pushing many families into poverty and desperation. As if the economic crisis wasn't enough, the devastating 2020 Beirut port explosion further destroyed vital infrastructure, crippling the nation's ability to recover. This catastrophe compounded the existing crisis, pushing Lebanon further into the abyss. Adding to the woes, Lebanon's sectarian power-sharing system, designed to ensure representation for all religious groups, has, in practice, institutionalized corruption, creating a breeding ground for mismanagement and abuse of power. This corruption has consistently blocked reform, preventing the implementation of necessary measures to address the country's deep-seated problems. Despite the magnitude of the crisis, the same elites remain firmly entrenched in power, effectively stalling any hope of genuine recovery and perpetuating the cycle of despair. And without political reckoning, without accountability for past misdeeds, Lebanon's nightmare, tragically, continues unabated. It is the ordinary people, the everyday citizens of Lebanon, who are paying the ultimate price, bearing the brunt of their leaders' monumental failures and systemic corruption. Lebanon, in its current state, stands as a stark warning to the world, a chilling example of what happens when trust, the very foundation of a functioning society, in institutions is irrevocably lost, leading to a complete societal breakdown. In Argentina, a land of vibrant culture and passionate people, a nation of vast resources from fertile farmlands to abundant minerals, and a wealth of human talent, economic crisis, a specter that haunts the national psyche, is a recurring nightmare, a pattern etched into the country's history. Chronic inflation, an ever-present threat to financial stability, fueled by decades of relentless money printing, a policy often used to paper over deeper problems, has eroded and ultimately destroyed faith in the peso, the national currency. Argentinians, wary of the peso's instability, think, save, if they can, in any way possible, and meticulously price assets from real estate to everyday goods, in US dollars, seeking a safe haven from devaluation, creating a dual economy where the peso struggles alongside the more trusted dollar. The country, burdened by a history of financial mismanagement, has defaulted on its debt an astounding 9 times, a testament to its economic woes, making it, unfortunately, a pariah in global markets, struggling to attract foreign investment. Each bailout, offered as a lifeline, brings austerity, painful cuts to public spending, unrest as citizens bear the brunt of economic hardship, and a return to populist policies, often unsustainable in the long run, trapping the nation, it seems, in a seemingly endless cycle of boom and bust, a financial roller coaster. Savings, painstakingly accumulated, are wiped out in the blink of an eye. Poverty remains stubbornly high, a stark reminder of the human cost, and the dream of long-term stability, a prosperous future, slips further and further away. New leadership, riding a wave of discontent, promises radical reforms, a complete overhaul of the system, but the path ahead is undeniably risky and potentially very painful. Will Argentina finally break free from this destructive cycle, or be condemned to repeat its tragic economic tango, a dance of crisis and recovery? The world, with a mixture of concern and fascination, waits to see if this time, against all odds, will truly be different, a turning point for the nation. Argentina's future, its economic destiny, hangs precariously in the balance. Turkey, once an emerging market star, now faces crisis from unorthodox economic policies. The government's refusal to raise interest rates despite soaring inflation has sent the lira into freefall. Ordinary Turks see their savings evaporate and the cost of living skyrocket. Currency collapse fuels more inflation, creating a vicious cycle. Political interference has weakened institutions and scared off investors. Recent signs hint at a return to orthodox policies, but trust is badly damaged. Rebuilding stability will be a monumental task. Turkey's future depends on restoring confidence and sound economic management. The stakes are high for its 85 million citizens. The world watches as Turkey stands at a crossroads. Pakistan, a nation of over 230 million, is perpetually on the brink of crisis. Chronic trade deficits and heavy reliance on remittances and foreign loans have created a cycle of dependency. Debt servicing eats up much of the budget, leaving little for essential services. Energy shortages and a weak rupee make daily life a struggle. Negotiations with the IMF bring painful austerity, sparking public backlash and instability. A narrow tax base and powerful vested interests block reform. Political turmoil undermines investor confidence. Pakistan must boost exports, broaden its tax base, and enact real reforms, or risk deeper crisis. The clock is ticking for meaningful change. Its fate will shape the region's future. Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation, is trapped by its dependence on oil. When oil prices fall, the economy plunges into crisis, stifling other sectors. Corruption and inefficiency plague oil management, while most refined fuel is imported. Fuel subsidies drain public funds, starving schools and hospitals. The naira's instability and multiple exchange rates fuel inflation and corruption. Recent currency reforms triggered massive devaluation and soaring prices. Food inflation is pushing millions into hunger and desperation. Rising debt crowds out investment in critical infrastructure. Nigeria must diversify, stabilize its currency, and fix its finances, or risk squandering its potential. The giant of Africa stands at a crossroads. Egypt, with over 100 million people, faces a storm of inflation, devaluation, and food insecurity. Debt-fueled mega-projects left the country with massive foreign debt. External shocks like the war in Ukraine exposed Egypt's reliance on imported wheat and energy. The Egyptian pound has lost over half its value, unleashing painful inflation. Food and fuel costs have soared, straining the government's bread subsidy program. Food insecurity is a growing threat, with limited resources for agriculture. Recent IMF reforms and Gulf investments offer a lifeline, but challenges remain. Egypt must manage debt, reform its economy, and protect its people from inflation's harsh realities. The path forward is uncertain and fraught with risk. Egypt's resilience will be tested in the years ahead. Venezuela, home to the world's largest oil reserves, is a case study in total economic collapse. Years of mismanagement, expropriations, and price controls destroyed the economy. When oil prices crashed, the government printed money, unleashing hyperinflation. The bolivar became worthless, life savings evaporated, public services collapsed, and millions fled the country in search of food and safety. International sanctions deepened the crisis, making recovery even harder. Informal dollarization has tamed hyperinflation for some, but most remain in poverty. Venezuela's infrastructure is in ruins, and its productive capacity is gone. The country stands as a tragic warning of the cost of failed policies. Recovery will take generations. Venezuela's story is a lesson in the dangers of unchecked power and economic mismanagement. Zimbabwe's name is synonymous with economic disaster. Hyperinflation in the 2000s destroyed savings and forced the country to abandon its currency. A decade of using foreign currencies brought stability, but underlying problems persisted. The reintroduction of a local currency revived old fears. Confidence remains low. Most people still use US dollars, creating a dysfunctional dual currency system. Currency instability fuels inflation and deters investment. High unemployment and a vast informal sector keep most outside the tax system. Political turmoil and land disputes have isolated Zimbabwe from global lenders. Without real reform and restored trust, Zimbabwe risks repeating its past failures. The ghost of hyperinflation still haunts the nation. El Salvador has taken a bold gamble, making Bitcoin legal tender alongside the US dollar. The move aimed to empower the unbanked and lower remittance costs. But public adoption is low, and most prefer the stability of the dollar. The government's Bitcoin purchases have lost value, straining public finances. Credit agencies and the IMF have raised alarms, making borrowing more difficult. Plans for a Bitcoin city and volcano bonds have drawn global attention and skepticism. Critics call it a reckless experiment. Supporters see a leap into the future. El Salvador's financial stability now hangs in the balance. The world is watching to see if this bet pays off or becomes a cautionary tale. The stakes couldn't be higher for this small nation. We've seen how debt inflation and poor policy can push nations to the brink. These crises are lived realities for millions, not just abstract theories. The path forward demands reform, courage, and the resilience of ordinary people. The fate of these countries is not yet written. The coming years will test their ability to pull back from collapse. The world is watching and learning. Which country do you think is most at risk? Let us know in the comments and subscribe for more stories that shape our world.